All right, so thank you guys for joining us another in this series from our nutritional sciences students covering a variety of topics this spring. Today we have Emma, Kaitlyn, and Sophia, first-year students from nutritional sciences on our Oklahoma City campus. So they'll be talking to us about calcium and the importance that it plays in our overall health and diet, and looking forward to see what they have to share with us today. So thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Emma Cohn, and I'm also here with Kaitlyn Reed and Sophia Martz, and we are dietetic students at the OUHSC Oklahoma City campus. And today we're going to talk to you guys about calcium and how you can build that into your diet. So the title of our talk, to go with the spring theme, is Spring to Life with Calcium. So we'll just have a couple objectives to keep you all engaged. We would like for you all to be able to explain what calcium is by the end of this presentation, why it's important, and what foods that it can be found in. Another one would be to identify calcium needs for all ages. You obviously need different amounts of calcium if you are a toddler versus an elderly. And then the last objective is to name 6 ways to prevent osteoporosis. And we will also go into what is osteoporosis. A little bit of an overview. We'll start with a pre-quiz to just judge your general knowledge of calcium, and then explain what calcium is and its importance, osteoporosis, exercise and how that plays an important role in calcium, who needs calcium, vitamin D and its role with calcium, food examples that contain calcium, and a couple meal plan examples. We'll finish with deficiency and supplementation of calcium, and then have a post quiz to assess what you learned throughout this.
All right, so to get started with the pre-quiz, we have a QR code for you guys. So if anyone is unfamiliar with them, you just take out your phone and open your camera, and you should just be able to put it over the little QR code and maybe tap the middle of it, and it should give you a link to pull up to take the pre-quiz. So we will give you guys a few minutes to do that. If you can't get it, we can also put it in a link in the comments, so just let us know.
Okay, it looks like we have had quite a few thumbs up. So if you were still taking the quiz, feel free to finish that. There's just a few questions, but I'm going to go ahead and start talking about some of the content here, talking about what calcium is and what it does. All right, so the first slide we have here, what is calcium? Calcium is a mineral, which is an inorganic substance needed to maintain health. So we talk a lot about vitamins and minerals in nutrition, and this is just one aspect of health. Calcium is the most abundant mineral in the body, and it can be found mostly in the bones and teeth, but there is a little bit of calcium kind of throughout the body as well, as it's used for numerous vital functions. The USDA estimates that about 30% of men and 60% of women in America do not consume enough calcium. So that's why this makes a really important topic for us today. Calcium is a nutrient of concern for the general public. And I think as we go throughout this, you'll understand why. Okay, here we go. All right, so why is calcium important? Well, the general theme of our talk today is bone health. So calcium is vitally important for building and maintaining strong bones. Bones are mineralized, which means numerous different minerals are kind of compact into those bones while they're created and formed. And calcium is one of the biggest ones. Some other functions of calcium that we might not think about as much, but are still very important, would be the need of calcium for muscle contractions, blood clotting and blood pressure maintenance, nervous system signaling, and neurotransmitter and hormone release. Calcium can act, it goes through something called calcium channels through all of these functions, muscle contractions, neurotransmitter and hormone release, and it allows the functions in the body to progress as it rushes into cells and allows a cascade of other events to happen. All right, so talking more about bones, we're going to talk a little bit about osteoporosis here. So what is osteoporosis? Well, osteoporosis is the weakening of bones. They become very brittle. They have less mineralization. And this increases risk of falls and fractures and overall just a lot of injuries. And our skeleton is very important because it gives structure to our entire body. We'd kind of just be a blob of jelly if we didn't have a skeleton. And it helps facilitate movement. So anatomically, muscles are connected to the bone. And so when we move our muscles, the bones kind of help as a lever to be able to do movement. It also protects our vital organs. Think of like the rib cage, the spine, the skull, protecting the brain. And it also stores minerals inside of the bones. So this is kind of where calcium comes into play, along with numerous other minerals. And then the skeleton does a whole lot of other things, like even creating blood. Without ample calcium in the diet, the body can begin to take calcium from the bones to use for those other functions, like we talked about before, like muscle contraction, being able to release hormones and neurotransmitters, things like that, which when the body takes that calcium away from the bones, it can begin to weaken the bones, as we see in osteoporosis. So this cascade of events that leads to osteoporosis usually begins with something called osteopenia, which is kind of the first steps in those bones becoming weak and brittle, and then further progressing to a possible diagnosis of osteoporosis. So kind of a objective we have snuck in here, bone mass peaks around 30 years old and can begin to taper off as we age. It's not exactly 30 years old for everybody, but it's around that age that we see people reach their peak bone mass. So before that, as we're reaching 30 years old, it's important that we take preventative measures to make sure we can achieve as much bone density as we can. And then after about 30 years old, we want to try to maintain the bone mass and bone density that we have through some of the strategies that we'll talk about. With osteoporosis, this increases the risk of falls and broken bones and overall injuries, and especially in the elderly population. When we have broken bones, it's much harder to recover from some of that. So on this next slide here, I have a picture kind of just showing the difference of healthy bone and osteoporotic bone. So on the left, you'll see that it's very porous, a lot of gaps. And if you think about trying to break something in half, it would be much easier for something to break or to crack if it's very porous and poorly structured, as we see with the osteoporotic bone. On the left, or excuse me, the right side, we see healthy bone, and it looks much stronger. It's not nearly as porous. It would be much harder to break. So now we will move on, and Emma will talk to us a little bit more.
So continuing on with the subject of osteoporosis, talk about how we can prevent that, because that's kind of an important thing, is how can you prevent a disease from happening? So first off, just having adequate protein in your diet, but not excessive. Excessive protein actually may speed the loss of bone because it works with calcium. And so if in the absence of adequate calcium, if you have too much protein, it will actually stimulate bone loss. So of course, going hand in hand with that, you need the adequate calcium intake, and you'll follow the recommended dietary adequacies, which Kaitlyn will talk to you about later about the RDAs for each age group. And then supplement if needed. If you're not meeting the RDA, or if you go get a blood test and you just are deficient or don't have enough calcium in your blood, then you can take a supplement if needed. And the two good supplements are calcium carbonate or calcium citrate. A third way to prevent osteoporosis is adequate vitamin D, or calcium is useless. So vitamin D actually stimulates the calcium to be taken into the bone. So we need protein, vitamin D, and calcium all need to work together. The fourth prevention is to avoid excess phosphorus, and we'll get into that later. Also avoid smoking and excessive alcohol intake. And then engage in weight-bearing exercise. So exercise, why are we talking about exercise when we're talking about a nutrition or talking about a food? Well, exercise goes hand in hand with bones. If you think about your bones and muscles, you need to move in order to strengthen your muscles. So same thing is with a bone. You need to move, otherwise you will lose bone structure. So as you exercise when you're younger, that helps your bone structure change. So if you exercise when you're younger, as you get older, your bones will stay stronger. Weight-bearing exercises to prevent osteoporosis. So we don't just want to add extra weight on to us, because that could actually cause bone to break. But if you're using the bone that you already have, it will strengthen those bones, just like exercising strengthens muscles. So good weight-bearing exercises would be walking, running, even just taking the stairs, yoga, strength training, but not with heavy weights, with light weights. Tennis, pickleball, dancing, golf, hiking, bowling, even just like walking, parking farther away in a parking lot and walking into the building. Some other small habits that you could do that are not exercise, you could say, is like standing on one leg while you're doing the dishes. That's a good weight-bearing activity. Some non-weight-bearing activities would be swimming, because you're in water, and so the gravity is taken away from you, or biking, because you're not really using your weight. So bone and muscle strength is important regardless of age. Preservation of bone mineral density is another great reason to exercise. And then it can also help reduce your fall risk as you get older and your bones get weaker. If you're stronger, then you'll have less of a risk of falling.
All right, now we're gonna move into who needs calcium. So like we kind of mentioned earlier, everybody needs calcium, but you might need a different amount based on age. And so what we have on this slide for you is an example label of where you might be able to find calcium. So if you pick up something at the grocery store and you look at the food label on it, where this arrow is where it will tell you how much calcium is in it. And the percentage is going to be how much is in that particular food and how it relates to your percent daily value. So for adolescents, the recommended daily allowance, which is the RDA, is what is needed for 98% of healthy people in a population. So from 9 to 18 years old, you need about 1,300 milligrams a day, and this is equivalent to 3 dairy servings per day. So a serving of dairy is considered as 1 cup of milk, or like 1.5 ounces of cheese, for example. And then the tolerable upper intake level is the highest amount you can have in one day that without being considered to have any adverse side effects. And that is 3,000 milligrams a day. So you can see there's a pretty big range there. And then during that stage of adolescence, it's obviously a very important time in a child's life. There's a lot of growing, and they actually acquire 15 to 25% of their adult size. And because of this, they require more nutrients, including calcium, than adults or younger children. And calcium intake during this time is important because 45 to 50% of total skeletal mass is completed during adolescence. And for adults, the RDA from 19 to 50 years old is 1,000 milligrams a day, or 2.5 dairy servings. So as you can see, it goes down a little bit once you're out of the adolescence phase. And then the tolerable upper intake level is 2,500 milligrams a day. So that also goes down a little bit. And then adults require only 1,000 milligrams a day, because after that peak bone density is reached, the goal is just to maintain the current bone density, since you can't really build anymore after that. And then for the RDA for older adults, which is 51 to 70, males is 1,000 milligrams a day and females is 1,200 milligrams a day. And then as you can see, greater than 70 years old, it's 1,200 milligrams a day for both. And we wanted to make a note here for you all that postmenopausal women require more calcium due to their increased risk for osteoporosis. And this is because during menopause, normal bone turnover is altered due to that estrogen deficiency. And then next we have the female athlete triad that we wanted to talk to you all about. And this is more common than most people realize. So what this is osteoporosis. It's not just a condition in older adults. So the female athlete triad consists of disordered eating, amenorrhea, which is the loss of menstrual cycle, and osteoporosis. So it occurs in a lot of young female athletes, and it can also lead to the loss of bone density that might not be able to be regained. And this can lead to injuries like stress fractures, breaks, because of that low bone density, which is obviously not good for young athletes.
So as I mentioned earlier, vitamin C plays a huge role in calcium. So vitamin D in calcium, not C. Vitamin D enhances the absorption of calcium. It also helps to reduce bone loss. So if you take in say like you're eating a steak, have a glass of milk or a glass of orange juice with your steak. And the orange juice will actually help you absorb the protein. Yes, absorb the protein. Sunshine is the main source of vitamin D, but obviously when it's cold outside or dreary, we can actually not get enough vitamin D. So we sometimes will need to get that through our diets. You could take a supplement if you are deficient, but it's easily attainable in foods that we eat. For example, salmon, canned fish, so tuna salad, tuna sandwiches, mushrooms for vegetarians or vegans, and then eggs. So we'll talk more about calcium in food. Dairy is obviously the best source. It is the most easily absorbed, but not everybody loves dairy or can eat dairy due to different deficiencies or problems, digestive issues. So nuts are another good option. Other foods for vegetarian diets would be figs, broccoli, oranges. Good sources of dairy, we'll circle back. Good sources of dairy would be milk, yogurt, cheese, even ice cream has calcium. So calcium foods are also great sources of protein. As I said, protein, vitamin D, calcium all go together. Trouble with lactose, there are many reduced or lactose-free options that can be calcium fortified, which goes into the last point is calcium fortified. There's calcium fortified cereals or calcium fortified orange juice, calcium fortified mineral water, calcium fortified soy or almond beverages. So there is ways to get enough calcium in your diet without supplementing. So we'll move on and give you guys kind of some examples of meal plans.
All right, so the first one that we have for you is a non-restricted meal plan. So this just means for anyone who doesn't have any dietary restrictions or lactose intolerance or anything like that. And the foods that are underlined are going to be what are considered high in calcium. So for breakfast, we have plain low-fat yogurt with mixed berries and granola. For lunch, we have a kale and arugula salad with salmon. And then as a snack, we have string cheese and almonds. And then for dinner, shrimp tacos with lettuce, pico de gallo, avocado, shredded cheese, and low-fat sour cream on whole wheat tortillas. And then for a snack or dessert, we have frozen yogurt topped with blackberries and chocolate chips. And then Emma's going to take it to the next one.
So these meal plans are really just suggestions or ideas. It's not something that you should follow to a T. If you want meal plans, you could visit with your registered dietitian and they can provide you with great sources and really personalized diets or lifestyles. So lactose intolerant meal plan. If you can't have dairy, you can have avocado toast with scrambled eggs. The eggs is where you can get your dairy in for breakfast, and a glass of almond milk because almonds also have calcium. For lunch, tuna salad on tomato and lettuce. Surprisingly, lettuce actually has some calcium in it, which is very surprising. And whole wheat bread with an orange. Orange has calcium, but it also has that vitamin D, which helps calcium be absorbed For snack, apple with almond butter. The almond is the calcium rich. Dinner, salmon and broccoli are both calcium rich with rice and avocado and cucumber salsa. And then snack or before bed dessert, lactose or dairy-free ice cream.
All right. Yes, and then one last meal plan option for those that choose to follow a vegan lifestyle, which is where you do not consume any animal products. For breakfast, we could have whole wheat toast with peanut butter and 1 cup of calcium fortified soy milk. Fortified options or fortified foods are always a great option. And then 1 medium orange as well. The soy milk and the orange will be high in calcium. For lunch, we could have white bean soup with a whole wheat roll. A lot of beans are also very high in calcium, but they're also high in protein, so that's always a good source. For snack, we could have 1/2 cup of calcium-enriched orange juice and a handful of almonds. Again, the orange juice and the almonds are high in calcium. And then for dinner, we could have a rice stir fry with bok choy and broccoli being the high calcium foods, and then peas, carrots, and tofu also being a high calcium food. For a snack, again, apple slices and almond butter. The almond butter would be the high calcium food.
I'll go back one more time for y'all to see. Here's the non-restricted. And we will also provide a handout and the slides after this, and so you can have these for yourself. Here's the lactose intolerant one more time. And then the vegan vegetarian. So now we'll move on to deficiency. If you're not getting enough calcium, there are usually no immediate signs or symptoms of calcium deficiency, so it's not a huge issue right away. You can eventually develop hypocalcemia, which can occur after a long term of calcium deficiency or simply just not eating enough calcium. So this can cause muscle cramps or weakness, numbness or tingling in fingers, abnormal heart rate or appetite, and then eventually it will lead to bone loss and osteoporosis. But this is after not consuming enough calcium or being deficient after a very long term. So it's definitely a chronic issue. Postmenopausal women, people with amenorrhea, people with milk allergies or lactose intolerance, people, especially females who have small bone structures, older adults, and then if you consistently have a low caloric intake, these are all possibilities or risk factors of becoming deficient in calcium.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about supplements. So maybe you are deficient in calcium. What do you do next? Well, supplements are an option that can be used if you are deficient. Of course, something that's a big theme in dietetics and nutrition is we want to try to meet needs through diet and food alone. But if that's just not working, supplements are okay as well. Some of the populations that might benefit from utilizing a calcium supplement are those just not simply meeting the RDA. For whatever reason, maybe they, like Emma said, maybe they have low caloric intake, maybe they don't like calcium-rich foods, or maybe they simply just don't know what foods contain calcium, so they're not consuming them. Another population that is very at risk would also be postmenopausal women or those with low bone mass. As Emma mentioned before, postmenopausal women, because of the estrogen and things like that, they're going to have a lower bone density. So they may benefit from utilizing supplements. And then those who are lactose intolerant, we gave a lot of great examples of plant-based foods that have calcium in them. But oftentimes the things like beans, broccoli, almonds are not as high in calcium compared to dairy sources or are not as easily absorbed in the intestines as some of those dairy products. So those who are lactose intolerant might also benefit from utilizing supplements. For those that choose to use calcium supplements, it's better to take 2 doses a day at about less than 500 milligrams per dose. Calcium receptors in the intestines can become oversaturated, so they will absorb less with the more calcium that we consume. And then a note on when purchasing, we want to make sure, and on the next slide, you can see that as well. You want to make sure that we have a USP label on the bottle. Sometimes supplements like this can cost a little bit more, but don't let that deter you from purchasing the ones that have the USP label. Supplements are not regulated by the FDA. So unfortunately, there are companies out there that aren't totally honest about what's in their products. But with a USP label like this, we know that there's been third-party testing to verify that what they claim is in that product is actually in that product. So brands like Nature Made or other large name supplement companies are usually better to get supplements from, as they're more likely to be third-party tested. So they're verified that what is in this product is actually in this product. And then one last note about calcium supplementation. Before you decide to supplement with calcium, be sure to talk to your physician to make sure that this is a good choice for you, as calcium can interact with different medications, and just make sure everyone is as safe as can be.
So just a final wrap up. What is calcium and its importance? It is a mineral needed to maintain health. It's the main building block of our bones. Osteoporosis, it's the weakening of the bones. And remember, bone density peaks at 30 and then slowly begins to decrease. And then we also just talked about some ways to prevent that. Exercise is an easy one. Just go out and walk, park farther away. Exercise because it strengthens your bones, and then also, circling back, prevents osteoporosis and fall risks. Who needs calcium? Everybody. Kids need 1,300 milligrams. Teens need 1,300 milligrams. Young adults need 1,000 milligrams, and older adults need slightly more because of the risk of osteoporosis and falling. Vitamin D and calcium, because vitamin D enhances the absorption of calcium. Calcium-rich foods, we talked about dairy, nuts, and fortified products. And then we finished by talking about the deficiency and supplementation.
All right, so to conclude our presentation today, we're just going to ask if you can take a post quiz for us. It'll just be the same quiz with the same questions. I'm going to post the link in the chat because it is different. And then after you guys do that, if you would also do the thumbs up again, we will give you a few minutes to do that. And then we can answer any questions you might have and go over the answers to the quiz questions.
Wonderful information. Yes, while you guys are finishing up that post quiz and dropping any questions you have in the chat. If you haven't had a chance to attend some of the other topics that the students have presented so far, I encourage you to go back and check those out. There is some overlap. There's one over dietary supplements. So I know the ladies touched on it here. So if you want to take a deeper dive in that and kind of what they were noting on about the, what's verified by USP, and then some of the other things when it comes to dietary supplements, you can take a deeper dive with that one that we had earlier this spring. Also, when it comes to vitamin D and then how that all kind of interacts together, there was another workshop specifically on vitamin D. So really encourage you guys, if you haven't been able to attend the other ones, to look back at those other recorded presentations and see how they all kind of interact and overlap together, and the role that so many things has in our health, overall health, and really striving to achieve that optimal health in a variety of ways, and really having that variety of food that we eat, good wholesome food. And it's great that they showed us a variety of ways to reach that today, depending on, no matter what sort of lifestyle that you follow, vegetarian, if you're lactose intolerant, and so on, that you absolutely can reach those goals, and absolutely with the help of a registered dietitian and your physician with reaching those. So I see a few questions popping in here. And also, as a quick reminder, I will send a follow-up email to attendees with the link for the recording, as well as the slides and any additional resources that they would like to share with you all.
Okay, so to address we'll go over the quiz answers first. So number 1, name a calcium-rich food. The answer was almonds. Number 2, what age is peak bone density reached? That's age 30. Name a non-weight bearing exercise. That would be swimming. Where is most calcium found in the body? Bones. And then lastly, who would be at risk for osteoporosis? And this answer is a 60-year-old female who is physically inactive. And then now we can take questions. And I know that we've had a few come in, so I will start with them. So to address the question about the food label and what that was, if we remember correctly, we believe that that was calcium fortified almond milk is what that was. And then, do you want to take the next question?
Yeah. Sorry, we're just trying to read some of these questions here. Okay, I'm gonna look at the question from Pamela. If a person isn't able to be out in the sun enough, how much vitamin D should be taken for a person 60 plus in age? That's a great question. I don't know if we can give an exact recommendation on that. But like we said with calcium supplementation, vitamin D supplementation is also a great option. This might be something that you might want to ask your physician or a registered dietitian based on your health needs. I hope that was helpful, Pamela. Right, what else do we have? As an older woman, is lost bone calcium replaceable? Virginia, that was her question. I don't believe it's replaceable. Once you reach age 30, we have something in our body called osteoclasts and osteoblasts, and these are little enzymes that build or tear down bone. And the osteoclasts are the ones that break it down. Osteoblasts are the ones that build it. As we reach age 30 and a little bit older, the activity of those enzymes begin to, they're not as equal. So osteoclasts begin to be more active. So there's more bone broken down. But the benefit we still have is we can, by adequate calcium consumption, we can prevent as much bone loss. I hope that was helpful. The next question.
And also going, Virginia, with your question about what the difference is between calcium carbonate and calcium citrate. Those are just two different types of supplements. I actually looked it up, and calcium carbonate is a higher concentration, but it is less absorbed by the body than calcium citrate. So you're going to have to take more of the calcium citrate supplement, but less. Yeah. So just one is absorbed more and one is of higher concentration. Any further questions?
Wonderful, great information. Thank you all. We still have a few more workshops from our nutritional sciences students later this spring. So hopefully you can join us for those. And again, send that follow-up email with more information with today's workshop and links to register for those remaining workshops. And we can also make sure and have that information of where to find any recorded ones as well. I believe Kaylee dropped some of that information in the chat for me, but we'll send a reminder as well in the follow-up email.
Sorry, one more, Desiree, to follow up. You should not be taking both because then you could reach the upper limit of calcium. And so just taking one or the other, and that's a good place to talk to your physician about which one is best for you. Thank you.
Great, thank you everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.